Hello chess friends and welcome to your out of chess channel and welcome to the computer Blitz chess championship super final between the two top engines Stockfish 15 and Lc0. So the tempo of the super event is 5+5, so the engines have 5 minutes on the clock plus a 5 seconds increment, and so far it's a pure domination again by the Stockfish 15 engine. We have here a plus 26 result, so as I'm recording this video the result was 98 points for Stockfish 15 and only 72 points for Lc0. So again, Stockfish is the winner of the super event, but it doesn't matter. We want to see, of course, more games, more attacking opportunities, in particular openings, and of course in particular sidelines of openings. So let's see now a beautiful game that was played by Stockfish 15 against Lc0 in the Winawer French. And the Winawer French I've decided really to cover more because you have requested it many times that you want to see more about the Winawer, because it's the most often and most popular and even the most aggressive way to play the French. And I like the Winawer to play against it because there are many opportunities for both sides. So it's, in my opinion, the most dynamic French defense, because in some other French defenses the pawn structure gets blocked out, it gets sort of immobile, then you have to struggle for one pawn or for one maybe square in the position. In the Winawer already some wild things can happen in an early stage of the game. So let's see now the game. So Stockfish 15 against Lc0 in the beautiful Winawer French. So here e4, we have e6 by Lc0, d4 by Stockfish 15, d5, knight to c3, and as promised, bishop to b4, the pinning idea, the beautiful Winawer variation. The idea is clear. Black wants to create some structural weaknesses by playing bishop to c3, is trying to double up your pawn structure. Then you have two weak pawns, and also here maybe in the later stage a weak square on c4. So here in the continuation we have the advanced variation of the Winawer, the move e5, and now knight to e7. We have a3, and here after move bishop to c3, b takes c3, and now c5 by Lc0. So here queen to g4 was played, and now there are basically two choices. The pre-arranged line by the organizer was now kingside castling, although probably a more correct way is here to play king to f8. It's a weird square, of course, for the king, but now you see when you castle kingside, then you have always this threat of bishop to h6, so that's now the main issue. Then bishop to d3 could happen, so both of these bishops could be very dangerous against the castle king. But okay, here bishop to d3 was played by Stock 15, and now comes knight to c6. But in my opinion here a very interesting idea can be played now by black. Immediately the move c4, you get a tempo. If white retreats now to e2, this bishop is also standing a little bit in the way of the queen, so the queen is a little bit immobile here. But in my opinion there's only one good continuation now for white. White can play maybe the move bishop to h6, tries of course to deliver checkmate, and now black should cover the g file, and now maybe finally white can trade off the bishop for a knight. And now after something like f takes g6 and bishop to e3, we would reach now this position, which is in my opinion playable for black but also playable for white. White has also opportunities maybe to make further progress with the move h4 h5, but the problem in this line, the only problem that I see in this line, is a little bit the bad bishop here by black. So the bishop is a little bit paralyzed by its own pawn structure, but maybe in the later stage it can be maneuvered to d7 to a4, where it can attack maybe this weakness, but as I said, it's simply a bad piece on the board. So okay, this was maybe a way to go, but in the continuation after move bishop to d3, we have knight to c6 by Lc0, and now bishop to g5 by Stockfish 15. So now Stockfish is paralyzing the knight, is not allowing here this piece to break. So we have queen to a5, knight to e2, protecting now the pawn on c3, and we have now knight to g6. For instance, if you try here the move c4 now, it's not working again, because this is a little bit different, because you get bishop to e7, knight to e7, then you get the beautiful Greek gift. You have this beautiful tactical shot on h7, king to h7 has to be played, now queen to h4, and look at this, we can take out here the knight. And I think in this particular position it's a position that I think black should resign immediately, because this is such a bad piece. Look at this, it cannot come really into the game anymore, so the bishop is paralyzed by its own pawn structure, and white just should just here push pawns, is trying of course to open maybe the position in front of the king, and it's game over for black for sure. The evaluation here is +2 for white already, so the knight is here much better. So in the continuation, after move knight to e2, you see c4 is not working, so that's why knight to g6, we have a kingside casting, and now queen to c7, getting the queen more into defense. So we have now h4 by Stockfish 15, tries of course here to play h5, and then again this idea bishop to h6. So in the continuation, we have this stunning tactical shot by Lc0, knight takes e5, and this leads now into a forced tactical sequence. So every move now from this point on will be a must move for both engines. Of course, Stockfish has now to accept the challenge. We have d takes e5, knight to e5, we have queen to g3. So far knight takes d3 is not working, and the problem is now there are two choices for black. Black can play the move f6, so can protect the knight. You see there is a problem, the knight cannot move because of the tension of this diagonal. You can also play the move c4. So if you play c4, this is not working because you get bishop to f6, and now there is only one good way to cover yourself, maybe with the move g6. But now look at this, bishop to e5, and the game is over. So maybe the only way now to somehow survive this position is to play the move knight to f3, but it doesn't get better because queen to f3. Okay, you can take out now this this bishop on f6, but now the knight is coming very active into the game. Okay, maybe you can take out the bishop, but look at this now, queen to g3 comes with a beautiful check. Now you play king to h8, and again this beautiful tension on this diagonal. We have a beautiful stunning tactic, knight to g6, and the game is over here for black for sure. So as I said, this is not working. So the c4 again is not working. Sometimes in the Winawer it's working, sometimes it's not. Again, you have to be careful for both sides here because there are so many beautiful tactical shots, beautiful tactical traps. You see how dynamic already this Winawer can become. So okay, after move queen to g3 here, Lc0 tried to kick away the bishop and also to defend the knight on e5. So we have here now bishop to f4. Now comes c4. So you see again the bishop is trapped, but it's a little bit different now. And now bishop to h7. At least Stockfish is giving up the bishop for a pawn. It has to be played, of course. We have king to h7, and now knight to d4. And again, we should evaluate a little bit the position here. White can, whenever white wants, to trade off the bishop for a knight, and maybe then afterwards also to recapture the pawn on e5. But here look at this knight on d4 is a much better piece than this bishop on c8. So in a potential endgame, when maybe white is continuing with the knight against the bishop, again white should be much better. Again, this pawn chain is standing in the way of black's light for bishop. So this bishop is many times in the French defense such a huge positional problem. Whenever you have the opportunity, trade it off, because you see even in this game this bishop is simply paralyzed. It doesn't play anything here, so it's simply the worst piece on the board. So after move knight to d4, we have now queen to d4, and Stockfish continues now the pressure with the move h5. It's trying to play bishop to e5 and then to play queen to g6. So there are now several choices what you could do. You can play maybe here the move bishop to d7. You can maybe try to develop your bishop finally and maybe get it somewhere here, maybe to a4, where it's at least attacking something. But even on a4, I don't think that it's a good piece, because the c2 is protected, so nothing special. But look at this now, rook from a to e1 will happen, and for instance you play queen to e7, then you have this one, bishop to e5, f takes e5, and now we can simply take with the rook to e5 will double up. As I said, in this particular position the piece, the white's knight is much better than black's bishop. So instead of after move rook to e1, you could maybe try to escape with knight to c6, but it doesn't get better, because look at this, we have queen to g6. You can play maybe king to g8, but look at this, this is now a beautiful tactical shot. Knight to f5 threatens checkmate. If you cover, if you open maybe here the position like this, then you have h6, and the problem is now you cannot compete anymore with the queen. So you would love maybe to play with the queen here on e7 and cover everything. Now you would have to play rook to f7, but now look at this, h7, the pawn is marching. You have to play something like king to h8, and now you lose the rook. So if you go here after move h7, if you go to f8, then it's h8, a beautiful promotion and a checkmate. So this is not working. So you see, let's go back after move h5 that Stockfish played. There's simply no time to get this bishop out. So that's now the huge tactical problem. So that's why knight to c6 was played by Lc0. We have queen to g6 anyway by Stockfish 15, king to g8, and now h6. Queen to e7 can be played now because the rook is not on the e file, because Lila c0 played a different line. But now comes knight to c6, we have b to c6, and now bishop to d6 by Stockfish 15 tries, of course, to deflect here the queen from the defense of the g7. And now when that happens, then of course it checkmate here with the queen. So that's why you have to play queen to f7. We have a beautiful move by Stockfish, a takes d7. There's simply no time to take out the queen because you lose the rook here on f8. So if you try some different ideas, if you try queen to g7, then we can simply take queen to g7, king to g7, and now the rook is hanging, so white is up the exchange and has a completely winning endgame here. So that's why after move h takes g7, the only way to defend this position is to play rook to e8. We have now queen to f7, king to f7, and now bishop to f8 here by Stockfish 15. Stockfish protects now this very, very annoying pawn. And here comes what is, in my opinion, the most brilliant moment by Stockfish 15. It seemed to me in this particular position that nothing special here. I thought, okay, you have this annoying pawn, but this pawn cannot move anyway, so this is now an opposite color bishop's endgame, and this should probably end in a draw. But what Stockfish has prepared here really is sort of a brutal paralyzing idea. I'll explain what's all about, because look at this wasn't played in the game, but let's see some sort of human continuations that could have been played. Maybe bishop to d7 seemed to me in the beginning like a normal idea. You play maybe c5, you can play maybe e5, you have a decent compensation here, you have the opportunity maybe to break through here with some central pawns. But now comes a rook from a to b1. This would be, I think, the natural continuation by white. Maybe black has to complete now on the b file, but look at this now with the move f3. White should probably in this particular position create himself sort of a path for the king. But again, I'm pointing out this wasn't played in the game, but I was really curious because in the game Lila c0 played here rook to f8, simply got rid of the bishop, and I thought, okay, why is Lila doing this? Why it's not Lila simply defending the position, plays bishop to d7, like as I said. Now comes f3. Now look at this. In my opinion, e5 is a good idea here, maybe to make progress. Now king to f2, maybe bishop to e6, just improving the position of the piece. And look at this now, king to e3, you can maybe even play f5. But now comes the tricky part of this tactical sequence. Actually, white could take out the rook immediately, and look at this now, rook to b8, but now suddenly the rook is coming here into the game on the h file, and maybe you can play f4, doesn't matter. We have king to f2, now rook to e8, we play rook to h8, and look at this now, if we play king to g6, then of course we have this beautiful tactical shot, rook to h6. So you cannot take, because of course g8 comes with a beautiful check, and the game is over. So you would have to play after move rook to h6, king to f7, and now look at this, all of these pieces, which is really wild, are now paralyzed by white. So white paralyzed with this bishop, with the pawn, and with the rook, 3 pieces by black. So the king is out of game, the bishop is out of game, and also here the rook is out of game, because whatever you do, for instance, if you move the rook, then of course we can always take out the bishop and then we'll promote. If you play with the king here, then we can always create a check and then deliver a new queen. If you, as I said, move the bishop a little bit, then again also some opportunities are to play rook to h8 and then to promote here to queen. So but every of this piece would be paralyzed, whatever black does. Maybe black does some moves here with the pawns, but now the king will come into the game, and as maybe we push the pawn and then we sneak in with the king here, maybe to c5, and the game would be over. So that was the beautiful idea here by Stockfish 15. After this move, let's go back, after king to f7 and bishop to f8. So actually in this position, Lila c0 had to give up the rook for a bishop and a pawn, which is really wild. So because of the tension on the h file, because the rook could come here on h8, which is really wild. So beautiful idea here by Stockfish 15. So rook to f8, we have g takes f8, king to f8, and we have reached now a position in which, okay, white is up the exchange, but still black has sort of a decent compensation, because we have now 5 pawns in the center of the board. So central pawns will march here, and they can of course create further dynamics here in black's position. So we have here f3, bishop to d7, king to f2, we have king to e7, rook to h1, including now the rook into the game, of course, c5, we have a rook to h7, king to d6, and now rook to b1. This is a good idea to occupy also this beautiful open file. So f5, Leela c0 continues the pressure here. We have a rook to b7 attacking the bishop, bishop to c6, and now finally a rook takes a7. Very important move to at least create a beautiful passer here on the a file. So rook to b8, we have king to e3, d4, c takes d4, but now f4. A beautiful idea here by Leela c0. At least in this scenario, black is continuing now 3 pawns in the center of the board, and black is also trying maybe to push the pawn further here on d3, but this is not working because Stockfish calculated, of course, everything pretty well. King to g3, bishop to d5, we have a rook to a6, and you check, king to c5, rook to c7, we have king to b5, and now again Stockfish connects both of these rooks, which is very, very important. We have a rook to f8, we have king to f2, rook to b8, king to e2, now rook to h8, we have rook to h7. Stockfish 15 would probably love to, of course, to trade off the rooks, because then the game becomes more simplified, and then white should be winning easily. So rook to g8, we have rook to g7, we have a rook to b8, king to d2, we have king to c5, a4. So Stockfish just pushed the pawn further. Rook to b1, rook to a5 attacking the king, we have king to d6, again a new check, and now again a new check by this rook, rook to g5, king to f4, rook to g4, king to e5, again a perpetual after rook to g4, king to e5, now a rook to rook to a5, again attacking here the king indirectly, because now the bishop is a little bit paralyzed. Now Stockfish is threatening, of course, here the very annoying rook to e4 move. So we have now c3, king to e2, rook to c1, now comes rook to e4, and finally Stockfish grabs a very, very important pawn, because these 2 points were the only opportunity for Leela c0 to make something in this position. Now when the pawn is taking, actually the game is over. So rook to c2, king to d3, Leela c0 takes the pawn, but now also Stockfish takes the pawn here, and now suddenly, in my opinion, this is completely winning endgame here for white. So rook to a2, we have f4, very important move, which is not allowing here maybe black to push the pawn on e5. Here in the continuation, we have rook to a3, king to d2, we have rook to f3, and now rook to b5. Stockfish is trying to liberate the path here for the passer on the a file. Rook to a3, we have king to c2, we have a check, another problem, king to c3, and now Stockfish creates himself here really good path, so no checks are possible anymore by black. So we have here a rook to b6, again king to c7, we have a5 supporting the rook, and check, king to c5, nothing special. The king cannot be attacked all the time by black, so again a check, but now again here Stockfish has the opportunity to escape with the king. So king to a6, we have rook to f3, rook king to a7, Stockfish just connects the rooks, and now a very beautiful move, rook to b8, which is not allowing, of course, in some occasions even a checkmate would be possible here. Imagine you lose the game when black is playing the rook to 8. I think I would be frustrated for a week if I would lose the game maybe with a check here by the rook and the bishop on a8. But okay, that's why rook to b8, Stockfish is trying again to simplify the game. We have rook to h5, rook to b6, bishop to c6, Stockfish push the pawn further. Everything is glued together, everything is really compact here by Stockfish 15, rook to f5, and now a beautiful tactical shot, rook to c6, we have king to c6, a new check, king to d7, and again a beautiful move here by Stockfish 15, king to b6. So Stockfish even sacrificed the rook here. For instance, if you take king to c8, then of course a7 can be played, and there is no good way anymore to get behind the pawn. You cannot include the king, so white will promote the queen for sure. Then we can play also this one, then also queen to c7, and the rook, for instance, would be hanging, so it's again game over. So after move king to b6, here Leela c0 tried rook to f6, rook to c7, a check. We have now a7, rook to g6, and here A8 in after this promotion. It was a beautiful checkmate by Stockfish 15. So a really beautiful game, I think. In the beginning, this beautiful tactical sequence, then also in the end this end game strategies with really some wild ideas over Winawer. We have to, I think, say there are better lines, of course, for black to play in the Winawer variation, but still, if you face maybe some of these lines, I think you can use many of this Stockfish 15 elements, because you see how Stockfish plays the game aggressively. It's not allowing here in the beginning really black to breathe. Then when it has, of course, a beautiful advantage, we saw when when Stockfish was up the exchange, then it slowed down the pace of the game, played really solid and beautiful endgame moves, and won the game eventually, then also with some beautiful endgame tactics. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Winawer for sure. If you want to see more position brilliantness and brutal tactical games like this, check out my Commons Chess Games Played by Computer series with some more games played by Lc0, Alpha0, Stockfish 15, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.